What else did you get out of it? Just the
From no one having ever heard of us before to more than 600 startup applications from more than 60 countries around the world.
I think those are three great things.
But we spent 6 months.
Key is that you're recognizing this and we're working on solving for it.
I would say it's an open question for us.
Welcome to 2021 and welcome back to the D3 mission log. This is the learning journey for the third derivative, where we're going to document the lessons learned as we build the world's largest climate solutions accelerator. So just to recap, in December, we launched third derivative, the world's largest climate tech accelerator with 47 great companies. And we've been tracking the lessons learned with Bryan, Guido, Hassin, who's the CEO of third derivative, on a weekly basis. We're going to talk this week about the sort of selection process, how you came to 47 companies from a much bigger solicitation. Bryan, what can you offer those out there watching this in the future about running a good accelerator selection process from that experience?
So first of all, let me make no guarantees about a good accelerator selection process per se. I will say we ran one, right? We thought it was very important for us to get points on the board and not let perfect be the enemy of done and get started here. But I think we've learned a lot through that initial process, and we're still learning. I think we still have a lot of open questions that don't have answers yet. We recently conducted a review of our selection process, and we're able to kind of tease out a few kind of trends or patterns that emerged. So, for us, we had this soft launch where we went from no one having ever heard of us before to generating within just a few weeks about, I think, more than 600 startup applications from more than 60 countries around the world with, a breadth of functional and sectoral areas, from digital energy optimization to novel battery chemistries to electric vehicle technologies to photovoltaic coatings and kind of everything in between. And then it was a real challenge for us to figure out, okay, given this amazing broad deal flow, how should we actually make up our inaugural cohort? And especially for us, our theory of change is built around the deep collaboration between our startups and our corporate partners and our investors. So, we couldn't just pick startups we thought were cool. We necessarily needed to socialize them and make sure we had buy-in and support from our other partners as well. So actually it was a really long process for us. It took really the better part of 6 months, which is longer than we had hoped that it would. So we are trying to figure out how to do things kind of better, faster, stronger, more efficiently, or on a more continuous basis as we move forward. Two key takeaways. One was that for us, networks were really critical for quality deal flow. We leveraged our networks through, New Energy Nexus, through Rocky Mountain Institute, our two kind of parents. We leveraged our individual, personal, and professional networks. At one point, some of our junior staff actually just logged in as our head of investments and research onto his LinkedIn and just started sending application solicitations directly to startups kind of in his network. And a lot of our kind of most promising deal flow came through that really direct outreach, as opposed to the kind of more broad open calls that we did.
Work the network.
So work the network was really effective for us. And, networks are also biased, right? Our networks are broadly privileged. They're generally North America centric. And so I think it's a two-sided coin. We do need to work those networks, and we also need to expand those networks. Yeah. Those are a couple of key takeaways for us. We also, we were really proud of generating that kind of broad, diverse application pool in such a short amount of time. 61 countries represented. But at the end of the day, our inaugural cohort looks decidedly less diverse. I think we have only 11 countries represented in our final cohort, and we definitely have a strong weighting toward North America. I think more than 2/3 of our startups are kind of based in the United States or Canada, which is not our global aspiration. Again, we thought it was crucial that we get points on the board and get started with something and learn from it before we try to improve and optimize moving forward. Frankly, I think that's a result of network bias. Again, we really need to engage more diverse partners for deal flow and also for review. I think in many cases, a lot of the criteria that we were using to review and qualify startups was heavily biased by a very kind of North American VC-centric model, which is sort of the de facto status quo here. But it's a model that we're actually trying to disrupt and break. So we need to be more open to other models that might also be able to help us kind of co-create really phenomenal and scalable success stories in climate tech.
Wow. Well, managing for bias in the networks and setting up for success with diversity sounds like a whole nother lesson to be discussed at length another time. But what else did you get out of just the pure logistics of the selection process and optimizing it?
Yeah, so when we looked back, so we were careful to kind of take our pulse several times over the course of the selection process. And one thing we noticed is that of our final cohort of nearly 50 startups, about half of them, our team was basically already convinced that they were the right startups to bring into the program very early in the process. So, weeks into the process. But we spent 6 months doing deep technical diligence and this really iterative, collaborative process with all of our different stakeholders and partners, and bringing on extra subject matter experts to do even deeper diligence in specific areas. So I would say it's an open question for us, but if we can solve it, one that could be extremely valuable is, how do we kind of optimize effort and speed here? How could we get to a yes very quickly for those 50%, and then focus more of our deeper diligence on some of the other 50% as well?
That is a good question. That's fascinating. The baseline was already halfway there and you took 6 months to confirm it. Well, look, I think those are three great things. If you want to add one more, but we should wrap so we could keep the lessons short here and bite-size and
sure. Let me add one final one. And here again, this is something that I don't think we've solved per se. Something we're proud of is that 2/3 of our founding teams have at least one what we would consider kind of a historically underrepresented founder. Women, BIPOC people, veterans as well, and part of that came from we took an automatic second look at any founding team that had that kind of representation. So even if it looked like, maybe these aren't a great fit, if they had that representation, we automatically gave them a little bit of extra diligence and consideration. So we're proud of that as a good first step. But here again, if we kind of put all of our founders together, we still end up with cumulatively a lot of kind of white, male, North American centric founders. So I think it again points to our need to broaden and diversify our network, and to consider our kind of acceptance and evaluation criteria in ways that may not correspond with kind of white, male, North American centric kind of typical acceptance criteria as well. So I think good initial steps and lots of room for improvement there.
Absolutely. And I think key is that you're recognizing this and we're working on solving for it. So first moves are important. Wrapping networks work, but we've got to manage for any bias in them. We have good intuition and gut instinct. How do you go with that and optimize for that? And keep focusing on diversity and equity and inclusion in the process so that we have better outcomes. Absolutely. So great lessons here. Going to wrap this week with just your startup of the week. Tell us one of your 47 companies for the moment.
So I'll pick one that actually is a great example of some of our kind of privilege network bias here, just because on this founding team, there was one person who was a mate of mine from college. There is one person who went actually to school where I grew up, and there's one person who is related to a colleague of mine who's a professor at Duke's Fuqua School of Business, focusing on kind of climate-oriented business, which doesn't take anything away from them. They're doing amazing things, but it is a very kind of stark reminder of us sometimes operating in relatively insular networks and insular spaces. So a huge shout out this week to SilviaTerra, who actually just closed a round of funding. So they've got more resources in the tank to kind of scale and grow and achieve their next milestones. And they're really neat. They use satellite imagery and other geospatial data actually to track every kind of forest resource. I think right now they're focused in North America, but hopefully eventually the world, to build kind of really quantifiable carbon markets, So, investing in reforestation, you can actually track the carbon impact over time of those investments, and match that up with carbon credits or other types of carbon markets. So really neat approach. Strong forestry background coming out of the Yale School of Forestry, and really excited to see where they take this company.
SilviaTerra, watch this space. All right. Thanks, Bryan. We'll come back to you next week.
Cheers. Good. See you, Danny.
Bye.